Okay, so yesterday Google launched Gemini 3, the much anticipated next model in the Gemini range. And it is good. It's really good. But trying to explain how good it is difficult. You'll see a lot today of people talking about how it's performed on benchmarks, but it's quite hard to translate that into what it means for people using it in their business. Does ARC-AGI 2 mean it's going to write a good email? Does it mean it's going to automate a supply chain? Let's take a look through everything about the launch, first opinions, and some first tests from people like me or others who had early access to the models. And the first opinion we can look at is actually from Sam Altman. Yeah, he tweeted last night, just after the launch, congrats to Google on Gemini 3, looked like a great model. He's a humble guy, so it's not super surprising that he's come out with this, but yeah, again, maybe this is a pretty good indicator that the head of the competition is doing this. Yeah, obviously, yeah, it's an interesting one. And yeah, I have to agree with him. It is a great model, especially when you put it into perspective of the GPT 5.1 launch last week. If you watched our video on that, we made a lot of mentions about how it was worrying that we were comparing it to Gemini 2.5 Flash and Pro in our benchmarks. And yeah, this is just another indication. Gemini 3 feels like a completely different generation of model to GPT 5.1. Yeah, and let's look into exactly why that's the case. So you're going to see a lot of this today. So this is, if you haven't seen this before, LLM models are evaluated against benchmarks. And this is just so we can compare apples to apples with different models. Every time a model launches, you'll usually get one of these charts on the launch page. And often it'll be like cherry-picked stats to make the model look good. Sometimes models do get in trouble for that. If you can remember when Llama 4 launched, Meta got a lot of stick for over-tuning the model to work well just on these benchmarks. So that's something to keep in mind that as we look through these, you can't just look at this like mathematics AIME 2025 benchmark and say that GPT 5.1 is 94% perfect. But yeah, essentially the difference between Gemini 3 Pro and the other leading models is like staggering. And that's why people today are going to be saying that this is a different generation of model. So if you look at the top one, Humanities Last Exam, which is an interesting name for a benchmark, but essentially this is just a very broad exam covering different topics. It covers maths, physics, biology, social sciences, etc. It's basically like an exam that you would give to a human. So it's a kind of a good measure of how well an LLM is performing versus a human. So this is a good measure of that, as well as the fact that this is a very diverse exam. So it can show you how well this LLM will perform across different tasks rather than being specialized to computer science or to maths. And yet, if we ignore Gemini 3 for a second and just look at the other three on here, Gemini 2.5 Pro was already really solid on this. If you imagine that Gemini 2.5 Pro came out in March this year, Claude Sonnet 4.5, which came out in the last couple of months, it only hit 13.7 on that. GPT 5.1, which came out last week, hit 26.5. And these were good scores. Gemini 3 Pro hit 37.5 just based on the LLM with no tools. They have included search and code execution in here, which I don't know, like it's maybe not quite cheating, but it's like you're bringing in like a scientific calculator into an exam. And fair play, because maybe you're the only candidate that can figure out how to use it. But yeah, it's maybe cheating. But even without it, like 37.5, nothing else is even in the 30s. So this is a huge improvement. And this is the case for all of the other ones. If we look through any of these, like AIME 2025 for mathematics, yeah, we're scoring 95%. Perfect with code execution. So in cases where it's created a tiny applet to solve problems, it's perfected maths, which is great. And then another big talking point, people are saying that Gemini 3 is next level for visual understanding. All of the previous models could take in an image, but Gemini 3 is currently the best at reasoning with that image. So if you look at things like Screen Spot Pro, which is a test evaluating how well the LLM has understood what's on the screen, it's hitting 72.7, which again, the closest is 36.2. What, that's like double as that's twice as good, twice as correct as Claude Sonnet 4.5, the next in second place. Absolutely blows GPT 5.1 out of the water. And this is a really good one because if you imagine we're getting to a place where LLMs or AI models are starting to operate with computers as if a human would. If you imagine that right now, there's limitations on what LLMs can do. If you want it to go book you an Airbnb in a city close to a conference, right now it can't really do that because it would need to have like good API connections to the tool. So that would require Airbnb to make some kind of like API or tool available to the LLM. This ScreenSpot Pro score is saying that Gemini 3 Pro can do a pretty good job if it just takes over your laptop, logs into Airbnb. It can understand what's on the screen, so it can fairly effectively create the next action. Where should it click? Where should it type something in? And this is going to be a pretty big game changer for how LLMs operate laptops. The next one is Vending Bench 2, which I'm actually going to put onto a graph just to show how good this is. And this is a really fun benchmark because it actually shows us how well LLMs perform as business owners. So the benchmark is basically if we give an LLM complete control over a vending machine. So it shows us how well an LLM can do things like pricing, handling deliveries, negotiating with vendors, handling refund requests, like a lot of the things that a business would need to do, in this case, just a vending machine. But one of the interesting things it tests, or one of the interesting problems it says that LLMs have, is that even though a lot of them initially can do a good job, managing a business requires a lot of coherency and understanding over a long period of time. And that's what this graph here is showing. So basically, the longer it goes, it needs to remember who is a good vendor. Is this particular supplier, can I negotiate on the price, or will they not like that? Is this customer subset? How does seasonality work? Does the kind of customer want a refund, or are they just complaining? Like, it needs to remember and hold all of these pieces of information in its memory and then be able to recall them later on. And that's what the graph is showing. So the blue line here is Gemini 3 Pro, as thinking enabled. The closest one is Sonnet 4.5, which again performed really well on this. And you see that like around the 1 month mark, like Gemini 3 and Claude 4.5 Sonnet do start to take off. But then there are points, like as we get to like the 6 month mark, you can see Gemini 3 Pro just working better and better. So it's not necessarily that like it's always better than 4.5 Sonnet at running a business. It's just over a long period of time, which businesses hopefully operate, it can handle that. And if we scroll down here, basically at the end, which is 1 year, Gemini 3 Pro made the most money or had the most balance in its bank. It lost the least, the most. One of the interesting things in here is it's flagged that Gemini 3 Pro is a persistent negotiator. And you can see this being very useful for your business. So basically, it just consistently negotiated for lower prices through all of the vendors, whereas other models would just give up after a while. Gemini 3 Pro is no, we're taking that lower price, or we're putting another supplier. Yeah, and this is the kind of performance that you'd want from an LLM. This is the difference you want between an LLM and a human. If you have a human negotiating these things, humans get tired. Humans can't operate 24/7. If you're having an LLM operating around the clock, you don't want it to really give up after the 10th email. You want it to just keep going and going until it gets the best price for you. And yeah, that's what Gemini 3 Pro is doing that other models weren't really doing before. And then another point is that, so this chart here is showing us which suppliers the model was using. Gemini 3 Pro is this blue one. So in the test, the vendors are split into different types. 2 obviously on your side, the friendly and the negotiator, and 2 are scammers. And this shows how it handles the different cases. And you can see on this left chart here, Gemini 3 Pro, compared to the other models, is just putting so much more money into the friendly vendors. And this is the benefit you get from having that long-term understanding. It's learned that the vendor is friendly and the relationship is good and it can work well with it. And it's used that to maximize the profit. It has the emotional intelligence, as well as the reasoning ability, as well as the long-term memory to make that kind of call. And yeah, and you can see that you can see the impact it's had on the business. So the next benchmark we're going to look at is the ARC-AGI 2. You're going to see this graph a lot because of basically how well Gemini 3 looks on it. So you can see here that, and this isn't cherry picked as well. Often we'll see they'll pick the LLM providers when they show these things. They'll pick one or two of the closest competitors, but nothing that's going to make them look too bad. On here, we have pretty much all the models launched in the last year. And yeah, Gemini 3 is just beating them all easily without breaking a sweat. So we'll talk about what this is like. So basically the ARC-AGI 2 benchmark, this is an interesting one because it's trying to test tasks that humans do fairly well and LLMs currently don't do well. So basically how well or how close an LLM is getting to human level performance. Obviously we can see that they're doing amazing stuff. This is basically focusing on the stuff that they don't do well. We'll look through we can look through some of these puzzles in a second, but they're essentially like visual logic puzzles, maybe the kind of thing you would see in an IQ test. And yeah, historically LLMs have not performed well at all. And yeah, look at this, like Gemini 3 Pro. Yeah, so look at this, Gemini 3 Pro is hitting what's that, 31% versus I think it's hitting 18 but for GPT-5 Pro. And when you switch DeepThink on, it's hitting 45%. Like nothing is even close to that. It's crazy. This really look at where like GPT-5 and Claude Sonnet 4.5 are. You have to go and find them lower down because they're so far away from where Gemini 3 is. And it's puzzles like this. Yeah, you can see here like they're basically kind of visual puzzles where you need to figure out what each of the colors means. You get example inputs and outputs. And I think there's 3 or 4 of these. And the task is to figure out what the colors mean, how the input translates to the outputs using the test cases you have. And these are not easy, but it's the kind of thing where a human can figure it out if they spend enough time. Like here, for example, the gray seems to mean if you put it on the corner, it will remove the shape and then drop it into these ones here. The blue seems to be, the green seems to be these little blue circles. The red seems to be the yellow squares. Yeah, and it seems to be where this one removes it, and these are the start points. So again, like a human could figure this out. This one's very complex. And then you get the test, and you have to, I'm not going to sit here and draw these orange crosses, but you get the picture. Like this is the kind of thing where the way that the human brain works, you can figure it out. You can store the information in your brain, and then you can keep going back and checking and translating. And LLMs historically have not performed well on these tasks. Either they misunderstand, or they can't reference the correct information previously, or whatever the limitation is, or they just can't understand things visually enough. And yeah, they haven't performed well. And yeah, this is the one where Gemini 3 with DeepThink is getting correct 45% of the time. But these are tough. Like you can go and take a look at these tasks yourself. Go and sit for 10 minutes and see how many you get correct. Like 45% is good on this one. And again, you're going to see this a lot because of how good the graph looks and how it has AGI in the name. So yeah, this is another place where we can see, where we can say that Gemini 3 is a next generation, because visually, nothing has come close. Visual understanding wise, nothing has come anywhere near it. And then so if we jump across to the LM Arena, so this is a ranking where people compare models to models on tasks with a sort of blind test. And again, Gemini 3 Pro is just a next level. So it's scoring 1501. The closest we have right now is Grok 4.1, which is also in the preliminary test. The next highest was actually Gemini 2.5. Claude and GPTs, again, we're never really that close. Yeah, again, Gemini 3 Pro is top here. This is the text arena. Whether you add style control or not, that just shows us if it's preferred when you're trying to do a good style, or if you're not trying to do a good style. If we remove the impact of it looking nice, and yeah, it doesn't really matter anyway because it's the top on both. If we go into the web dev leaderboard, which is how well does this model, like this is kind of like how well the model does with front-end design. So how well it does one-shotting the user interface of a website. Again, leaps and bounds above the next. Like GPT-5 was pretty good at this. It had 13.95. Gemini 3 Pro is 14.87. And like you can see that everything before that is just quite close. Gemini 3 is in the league. Vision, which is how well these models are doing with visual inputs. Again, Gemini 3 Pro at the top by some distance. So yeah, you can see from all of these. And then the last one is the LLM leaderboard of artificial analysis, which is the assessment of the intelligence across a few different metrics. Operates a bit more broad than the other ones. But yeah, again, none of that matters because it's Gemini 3 Pro is at the top by a margin. So yeah, looking across all of the benchmarks, we can basically see this is something special. This is maybe the biggest improvement we've seen in a model. This is the biggest leap we've seen in LLM models. This is maybe the biggest leap we've seen in LLM launches, maybe since GPT-4 versus GPT 3.5. It's maybe the best we've seen since GPT-4 versus 3.5. I'm not sure, but this is special. And Google just do this. You can see how big of a difference Gemini 2 to Gemini 2.5 was, 2.5 to 3. They don't launch the like tiny little like tweaks. They have version modeling, but they don't have these like tiny little versions like with GPT 5.1, 4.1, Claude 3.5, 3.7. They just do like huge major leaps. One thing that you can see on this chart is that Gemini 3 Pro is a bit more expensive than what we've seen with previous Gemini models. I think the price is about 20% higher than with Gemini 2.5 Pro. So it's not the case that if it was the same price, we'd say, yeah, just swap the model out. It's one way you'd have to be careful with how you migrate things over. And that brings us quite nicely to the sponsor of this video, which is actually Ez, Spring Prompt. So right now we are offering audits of prompts, and in that audit we'll provide an audit of the prompt, we'll provide an evaluation set, and we'll test that improved prompt across all the different models. And that includes Gemini 3 and Gemini 2.5. So if you are wondering how well your prompts are currently doing, and is it feasible, can you just swap things over? How will that look on quality, evaluation, success, and price? We can help you make that decision with a prompt audit. We're currently offering a 20% discount if you mention this video in the consultation call. So yeah, head over to springprompt.com and book a free consultation call so that we can talk about what we can do for you and how we can improve your LLM performance. So that's the benchmarks out of the way. Obviously, it looks amazing on benchmarks, but yeah, let's maybe take a look at how well this is performing in other places too. So I'll take a look at some of the tweets of people who've already been building something cool. So here, this is a 2-shot, which means they took 2 different messages or maybe 1 iteration to create a working simulation of a power plant. So this looks like it was probably some kind of web app. You can see here, like, it's animating everything. Everything is well designed. You have the messages here, which I'm not a nuclear engineer, but I would trust that this is correct. This is pretty amazing. Like it took 2 shots, but we've seen with previous models, they just haven't really been able to get animations or these perfect, even after a few shots. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Again, another cool little interactive app. Peer asked Gemini 3 Pro to create a 3D Lego editor. And this was 1 shot. So this is 1 message, no iterations, and it made this for him. Yeah, again, you can see here that this is fairly complex. You can rotate the boards. You can see things from different angles. There's shading. It stacks quite nicely. This is 1 shot. That's crazy. Imagine how long it would take for an experienced web developer to make something like this. And this happened. This is 1 shot. So there's probably 1 minute of, maybe less of generation. So here, this is Ali I think this is in the Gemini web app. Help me understand DDoS. And this is one of the cool things that we can see with Gemini. Because it operates so well on text and on code, we're seeing when people ask questions, it's explaining them with like little interactive like mini web apps. So here it's explaining DDoS. Look how smooth and flawless like the animations and the SVGs are. Like with GPT-5, with Claude, we were always saying something is not quite right. Maybe something like the overlay is wrong, the direction is wrong, something like that was always slightly incorrect. But yeah, look at that. This is for just one question about a DDoS, and it's pulled that information in and it's explained it pretty well. Imagine how that's going to change just casually asking for things, how well this is going to help your understanding of any question you ask. And yeah, I'm going to keep talking about SVGs because this was one there's so many SVGs making up websites. They're so important. And LLMs up to now have not really been that good. If you want an icon, you've got something that maybe looks a bit too simple or the lines don't correctly match up. And yeah, this is Jesse, who was actually looking to hire someone to build some SVGs. And yeah, using Gemini 3 Pro via cursor, he's ended up with something like this. It looks, yeah, pretty cool. This is going to really improve, at least with me in my experience, whenever I was working on websites, I always want to add some kind of custom icons in there. I don't want to spend a lot of time looking through libraries or yeah, I don't want to spend a lot of time looking through libraries. Often for like smaller projects as well, you wouldn't want to go and hire someone necessarily to create you a SVG icon set. So the fact that this can just one-shot create everything that you would need, like websites are going to start looking really nice. And again, here's another one-shot beautiful website with an animated cube. And yeah, it just looks really nice. Like this is going to really improve how well the internet looks, at least for people who are using LLMs to code. Yeah, we'll leave it at that for today, but yeah, hopefully this has helped you to understand just how well, hopefully this has helped you to understand what that benchmark difference means, why Gemini 3 is so good, and why, at least why I'm saying and why a lot of other people are saying this is just another generation of LLM. This is going to change a lot. This is going to make a lot more things possible, whether it's creative writing, coding, visual understanding, that kind of like computer operation that we haven't really seen working too well. No, it's going to work amazingly well. And that's going to unlock so much. Websites are going to look better. Emails are going to look better if you're using it for that too. Yeah, this is a next level. And I see a lot of people today saying that like the narrative was that LLMs are stalling. I personally didn't hear that narrative too much, at least not when people were talking about Gemini. Definitely with GPT, yeah, I don't want to say that they're not making progress, but with the hype and then reception of the GPT-5 launch, some people were saying that, yeah, the disappointment there was reflective of the entire LLM environment and the fact that LLMs weren't the technology to push things forward. And yeah, Google have just come in here and said, that's definitely not the case. Here's Gemini 3. This is the new level for where LLMs should be. So yeah, over the next few days, as we continue to test and pull out some of our own benchmarks, as well as carry out some of those audits with clients to help them understand if Gemini 3 is correct, we're going to be figuring out a bit more about the model, where it's working well. But so far, like from the early tests we've made, I can't think of a single area that wouldn't be improved. The only question is whether that 20% cost increase is justified. There will be a lot of tasks where Gemini 3 is overkill, where you could maybe step back. We haven't got a Gemini 3 Flash yet. So for things that are a little bit easier, where we don't necessarily need this much reasoning, Gemini 2.5 Flash may get you pretty much all the way there, but at a, 30% of the cost. So that's the question that we're going to be trying to explore in the next coming days. But basically, yeah, if you're currently in a position where the smartest models aren't doing what you need them to do, and you need to push that performance higher, Gemini 3 is the way to go. Yeah, for anyone that does have questions about like deep questions, feel free to drop them in the comments of whatever platform you're watching on. If you do want to explore deeper about how well Gemini 3 can work for your business and you want to carry out an audit so that we can understand your prompts and test them across different models, different parameters, different test cases with our own set of evals that we've brought in specific to your case. But yeah, reach out to us on the platform or go to springprompt.com and book a consultation call. And yeah, we can talk about how we can improve your LLM, how we can push your performance, maybe even save you some cost as well. Yeah, until next time. Yeah, enjoy Gemini 3, enjoy building websites, enjoy understanding all of the problems with and enjoy understanding all of the questions you're asking to Gemini. Next time.